Well, okay then. Welcome and introduce yourself.
Okay, hi David. Well, thanks for asking me to come along today. My name's Ruth Hellema and I'm a fine art photographer. Pretty much from a minimalist perspective mostly. And my subject now anyhow, and during most of my time taking photos is architecture, modern architecture at the moment. And I shoot in colour and also in black and white sometimes. My black and white shots sometimes cross over into abstract photography. And that's pretty much me.
So where did your photographic journey begin?
Okay, well, it began 2006 when I took a short basic course in photography because I'd always wanted to try out photography, see what it was like, explore it. And I can't recall why I decided that was the time to do it, but I think it was just one of those moments when I said, do it, because otherwise you might not ever get around to doing it, time to just do one of those things that you've always wanted to do. So I did as I said, a basic course, and I had an analog camera at that time. So I learned a little bit about how to control the camera and developing one day in the darkroom. And after that, sort of just started going out with the camera every now and then, very much still a hobby. And it remained that way for quite a while. And I suppose the next thing is that I got a digital camera, and so then started getting out a little bit more, just because it's easier to take more shots with the digital camera. And I kind of thought that was going to be a major turning point in that, now I'm going to take this a little bit more seriously. I'm going to get out there and take many more photos. And I did, but then I looked at what I took, and I remember the first day out with the camera thinking, this is going to be amazing. Looked at what I'd taken, I thought, this is so boring. Why? It seemed to me like it was all turning out very, very well. But when I looked at what I'd taken, it was just dull. It was very, very dull. And I thought, well, why is it so dull? Well, one, the subject matter is not particularly interesting, even though at that time I thought it probably was. And also they're just flat, really, really flat. And I thought, well, really, I don't understand how to take a good photo. I know a good photo when I see it, and I thought, well, how do I get there? I need to get there, and I'm nowhere near there. So at that point, I started going to more exhibitions, more photographic exhibitions, and just really studying the photos and finding out a little bit more about what makes a good photo, researching online and everything. And then I started going out a little bit more, experimenting. And I also started thinking more about, well, what do I really want to take photos of? So tried all different types of photography, a bit of portrait, street photography, this and that, and just kind of started taking more photos of buildings. And I was living in Spain at that time, so the photos tended to be of traditional architecture, and that's pretty much what I fell into. I've always liked architecture, but I realised that I liked it a lot more than what I thought. So I took photos, again, very much as a hobby, every now and then. Started taking more photos of traditional Spanish buildings. And then I ended up coming back to Australia. And my partner and I, because I'd sometimes go out shooting with my partner, he's not a photographer, but he's interested in photography as well. So we had a little show of traditional Spanish architecture just at the Robert Burns Hotel. And then, so that was my first time I'd exhibited, so that was pretty exciting. And then I hadn't picked up my camera for a little while since I came back to Australia. I mean, I'd been in Spain for almost 2 decades, so it took me quite a while to adjust. To start the adjustment process, to really actually adjust to being back in Australia, it probably took me about 2 or 3 years. But to sort of, get the camera out again, that didn't happen for quite a while. And when I did, I realised, I don't really have something that I want to take a photo of, because the traditional architecture in Spain isn't in Australia. So it was this whole sort of exploration again. The journey began again of what do I want to take photos of. And I was at a friend's place one weekend and had my camera with me and just got a gorgeous garden. So started taking photos, and since she had a gorgeous garden, I took photos of the flowers. And so realized, wow, these flowers are pretty spectacular. And so I just really started noticing the flowers, the vegetation around my area, and just, in Melbourne, and decided that it was pretty spectacular, that I hadn't really noticed it that much since I'd come back. And well, to cut a long story short, I ended up having my first solo exhibition called Seeing Flowers, and that was at Gasworks on my side of the river.
Oh, I was thinking of somewhere else. Sorry.
And yeah, so I was very happy with how that turned out. Had fantastic support from the visual arts director there, Tracy McIrvine, and yeah, was very, very happy with my exhibition. But once again, I ended up being back at that same point. Well, now what do I want to take photos of? And not soon after, well, COVID hit. And I was very frustrated. Well, we're all very frustrated for many, many reasons. But I was particularly very frustrated because I had all these plans to go out and search for that next subject matter that I wanted to take photos of, and couldn't because, stuck in our 5K radius. But after becoming more and more frustrated and taking photos in my bedroom and everything, and not being particularly happy with, photos of the Venetian blinds and the other things that I'd taken, I thought, well, I'll just get out and see what's in this 5K radius. And took the camera out, went round the corner, and really noticed for the first time that there was an amazing building there next to the Espy. And so I took a photo of both of them. And that got me back into taking photos of architecture, but this time mostly modern architecture. So it's kind of really been the same story, really. Looking at my environment, well, asking myself this question, what do I want to take a photo of? And it really just being there in front of me. And then just really noticing what's there and taking photos of it.
Yeah. I want to go back to the start. You said
sure.
your photos the subject was boring.
Yeah.
What subject? And why do you think it was boring?
On that particular occasion I was referring to, it was of a couple of street artists. And the photos were boring because there was no contrast. And it just wasn't particularly interesting. I mean, what's interesting to one person is different to what's interesting to another, obviously. But I always try to find something that's a little bit different, something that's a little bit original. And there are many, many photos of street artists. And also, too, it depends very much who takes the photo of the street artist. I think with people, I don't think I'm very good at taking photos of people. I don't think I really capture that essence of people. My portraits are awful. So I just don't think that's me. So I don't think I'd really found what I was interested in taking and what I could really capture the essence of and really show what could be interesting within that sort of genre.
Yeah. What's your background pre-photography? Because I guess you got some self-awareness where you can look at something that you've made and said, well, this is no good. I'm not good at this. So Is there an artistic background
Not at all.
pre-photography? What were you doing?
Well, I mean, I've always kind of dabbled in little sort of creative projects. Very much dabbled, though. Nothing serious. I mean, I used to do a little bit of writing, not creative. As I said before, I was living overseas in Spain. And I fell into education while I was there. I mean, if we go back a long way, my background is actually an accounting degree, so completely different. Something that I I worked in for a year because I had to finish my degree. The part of the degree was an internship. And at the end of that year, I said, never again. I promised myself that I would never again do that. I would never again become so depressed working in something that I hated unless I absolutely had to. And I never have had to do that again. So my professional background is completely different. But yeah, when I moved to Spain, I fell into education. And quite a few opportunities came up through that, sort of writing for an English language magazine. On one occasion, I got the opportunity to participate in an ad for the Olympic Games because Spain was trying to get the Olympic Games. So there were all these little things that popped up, and some of them were sort of creative, you know. So I've always felt that I needed some sort of creative element in my life, but it's never been a particularly large part, and it's become much larger now. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure that if I haven't gone off track there.
No, that answers it. I just think I just wanted to see if there's any sort of creative career, because you're quite harsh on yourself, but you accept it. You know, and I don't know, maybe that's the accountant in you.
It could well be. It could well be. I mean, I think I'm quite self-aware and very reflective. And that's also been particularly important in education. So, and also too, I guess in the way that most of my career choices, sure, I had my studies to begin with, but decided not to go into that area. I've had to change careers quite a few times and haven't sort of gone back to study and then changed careers. Sometimes I've studied later on, but I've had to really learn a lot on the job to be able to move into those new careers. And part of being able to do that for me, anyhow, has been being very reflective on what I'm doing. And when I started teaching English as a second language, I didn't even know English grammar. In Spain at that time, they were really just desperate for teachers. And they weren't really looking very much at qualifications. So I pretty much had to learn English grammar and learn how to teach. And of course, then I went on to study again. But so that sort of self-reflective ability was very important. And if I hadn't had that, I don't think I would have got very far.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you've created your started your creative practice, I guess, relatively late.
Yeah.
Do you think? Do you think that has helped? Your background has helped with that? Do you feel like you've maybe missed out on anything?
Possibly missed out. I mean, there are a lot of years there where I could have been taking photos and learning, and I haven't done that. I guess it doesn't really bother me though, because I just find it all so exciting at the moment. And when I talk about my, trajectory so far, I could say it's self-taught, but I actually think it's self-teaching, because I really feel that I am learning so much and have the ability to learn so much more. Like Photoshop, I'm not good with computers, and in the beginning I hated Photoshop, and it's still not my thing. But just because it enables you to do so much with a photo, and my photos do have a lot of post-production. My color photos have a lot of post-production nowadays, and I've been able to do that through learning Photoshop tools, and that's something that I've done a lot more over the last year.
So you self-taught Photoshop?
With a lot of help from my partner. He's the opposite to me. He can just, pick up a program and just experiment with it and learn how to use it. So he's really helped me tremendously. I don't think I would have, got around to learning it myself. I probably would have had to have done a course. But because I just hated it in the beginning, I don't even know if I would have done that. But yeah, he's really been great in helping me a lot to learn some of those basic tools, to the point now where I don't hate it, and I will actually go off and learn some stuff by myself.
Yeah, and you also mentioned you started with film when you did your you did a course. You said, was it?
Yeah, just a very basic course in photography.
So, why didn't you stick with film? Why did you go? Why did you move pretty much immediately to digital?
Yeah, good question. Just trying to think back. I suppose digital is easier in that, you can use the post-production tools later on if you want to. I mean, you can do a lot, of course, in a dark room, but I didn't have those skills and I wasn't so interested in learning those skills. What I was interested in was the final product, I guess, not so much how I got there. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised one day if I did pick up my analog camera again and then really learn how to process film in a dark room. But maybe I was a little bit impatient. I'm very impatient, actually. But yeah, I wanted that final product. So I guess the moving to digital was just a way for me to get there a little bit faster. Also cheaper too, because since digital photography is just so common nowadays, it's there are fewer places where you can get your film developed at, and it's more expensive too. So it was a little bit restricting in that way. Had it been like 10 years earlier, it would have been more accessible.
Yeah, and I guess with the film versus digital debate, I mean, do you think in terms of results, one is better than the other?
I mean, I suppose quality-wise, unless digital cameras have got a lot better, and they are just getting better and better. If you compare the quality of my camera, which is not sort of, most modern, top of the range, an analog camera is probably better in terms of quality. But digital cameras are the more expensive ones. I'm not quite sure if they're there or they'll be there soon. But I guess too, with the post-production tools, I feel that I can get that quality now.
Reason I'm asking this is 06 is like around the time where digital photography became really accessible. Prior to that,
yeah,
there was a trade-off price and quality and all that. And so you would have been, especially doing a course, you would have been around a lot of purists and people who maybe snub their nose a little at digital photography. But I was thinking maybe without that background of photography, you were immune to that in a way.
Most of the people that I met at that time were actually had digital cameras. Interestingly though, in the camera club that I joined when I came back here, which was actually great to learn more about how to take that great quality photo. I learned a lot there. But there were a lot of purists there. And I still keep in contact with them. In fact, I went back, they asked me to give a talk about my colour photography recently. And one of them actually came up to me, and one of the purists, and was sort of saying, well, do you class yourself as a digital photographer? Or do you class yourself as a, what did he say? Digital artist or a photographer? And I said, well, a little bit of both actually, because I take the photos, but yes, I do manipulate some of them, not all of them, but some of them quite a lot. So they look very, very different. And he sort of said, oh, will you still class yourself as a photographer then? And he was sort of then saying, I don't use any post-production. And I just go out and I'm a street photographer and I just go out and take my photos, and I don't need post-production because I can use my camera to get whatever result I want. And I think that's great, But that's one of the things I like about photography, that there's just room. I think there's room for everybody. And so many different types of photography. And now we're gonna have Gen AI photography as well. So I do think that there's merit in what everybody does, and that it's very enriching that people have these different perspectives. I probably couldn't take the shots that he takes. Technically, I'm not fantastic, because I do rely quite a lot on post-production. But my photos nowadays have moved. I think there's more of an artistic realm to them as well. So they're not just pure photos. When you look at them, you don't say that's gone through a post-production process, because it's not just a photo now. So his sort of question, I think I'm both. I think there is a sort of digital art aspect to my photos, but I think I'm also still a photographer.
Well, I need to ask. What kind of, if you're comfortable sharing, what kind of like manipulations are you making to these images?
Okay, so because I shoot from my perspective is a minimalist perspective. What I'm really trying to do, and this is what I guess most photographers try and do really, is to sort of capture what they see in front of them from their perspective. So what they notice and what they would like to share with people. It sounds very simple and it's very obvious, but we have a physical world that we're surrounded by. But the thing is, we each see it differently. And that's my perspective. The way that I see it is something that I want to share with people if they're interested in looking at it. And I guess an example there would be when we moved premises, my full-time job, we moved to Docklands, which I wasn't very happy about because I don't like Docklands. I find it quite soulless. And we were in the middle of the city before, so that was much more fun. But anyhow, first morning, walking down to our new office, not very happy. I mean, I'd heard it was an amazing office and everything. It's our own premises and that, but was not very happy. Walking along thinking, I hate it. And then we looked over to the left. Wow, there was this amazing staircase. And so every morning on my way to work, I look at this staircase. Every day it changes, the light, the time of day, the season. It changes every single day. And I love that staircase. I've been back on a few occasions to take photos of it. And yeah, that for me is the highlight of my journey on the way to work. And we went out for lunch with our team a couple of weeks ago, and I was giving directions to one of the guys because we actually went for lunch just near this staircase. And I'm like, when you get to the staircase, turn right. You know the staircase I'm talking about, that amazing staircase on the way to work. And he's like, what staircase? And he hadn't noticed it. In the year and a half that we'd been there, he hadn't noticed it. And that was for me like, haven't seen the staircase? How could you not have seen the staircase? It's the only thing I look at. But, he would be noticing other things on his journey to work. And if he were to describe his journey to work, he'd probably mention something that I haven't even noticed, So for me, that's what my photography is about. And getting back to your question of manipulation, so particularly in the colour photography, I want to highlight what I'm seeing. And so one thing that I do a lot is I remove the distracting elements, hence that sort of minimalist sort of simplicity. There might be branches in the way or cables or trees or whatever. So I'll get rid of them using the cropping tool. That's sort of the first step. Sometimes the perspective might not be quite right with buildings, particularly if it's a very tall building. You might be shooting from down below, and so the building's tilted. So I want to make it straight. Not always, but often I want to straighten it. So I'll play around a little bit with the perspective. Again, to really highlight what I'm focusing on, then I'll normally remove a lot of the elements. Sometimes it can be a part of the building itself. Sometimes it might be something adjacent. And then I'll play around with the colours. So to do that, I'll select all of the parts of the building that I might want to colour differently. And that's something I've been working with a lot more lately, the colours. really working with the color palettes. So thinking a little bit about the effect of color on people and how it affects our emotions, and choosing the colors, like they might be warm colors, they might be cool colors, but trying to really make a connection there with people's emotions, as well as the initial aim, which is to highlight the aspects of the building that for me really stand out.
So is it more about the excuse me? Is it more about the building? Are you trying to make you're not, well, it doesn't sound like you're trying to create a representation of reality. You're creating an emotion.
I think I'm trying to do both now. Initially, I was just trying to emphasize what the building was all about, but now I think I'm trying to do both at the same time. So I'm not changing the building so that those elements, the original elements, are no longer there. I'm keeping them, trying to bring them out a little bit by, as I said, removing, distracting parts, sort of stripping back the building so that what I want people to see is there. But then I'm trying to add in a layer of atmosphere and emotion, but without losing the essence. So kind of like what that question of me that was asked, digital artist or photographer, really trying to amalgamate those together.
Actually, I'd consider you a photographer because honestly, everything you do could be done in the analog world.
It could.
Takes probably a lot more work, but it's, I mean, half of Photoshop's tools are named after darkroom techniques.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Yeah, I would say you're a photographer. Mm-hmm. So what makes a building jump out at you? What makes you want to photograph a certain building, and what would actually make you not want to photograph a building or a structure?
Mm-hmm. That's a really hard question to put into words, because it's mainly when I see something that's different or interesting. And how do you define that? Because what's interesting for me is possibly not interesting for someone else. It could be the angle, it could be a shadow, so it could be the time of day, an interesting lines, shapes, geometrical shapes, juxtaposition, so there are normally a few different elements. Originality, like there was one building that I took one wall, take a lot of photos of facades, walls, not necessarily the main wall, but one wall that I took a shot of. It just had these they'd been attached to the wall, and they were just squares which had been attached to the top, and one of them was on its side, so it was a diamond. And the only other thing it had was a window. I quite like windows and doors, but it had this really sort of old window. But the main thing for me was that, this line of squares and this one that was a diamond. And I was thinking, why were those squares and diamond even there? And, why was that one? Obviously the screws or something had got a bit loose, but, it was just like, well, what's the story? I would have liked to have known the story behind, that one. But yeah, that just leapt out at me, and I thought it was interesting. So the wall was white. The also those shapes, those squares and diamond, they'd also been painted white, and the window was, I think it was also white. So to bring out what I saw in that wall, the wall ended up being green. The window, I wanted to bring it out, so that was red, not the glass, of course. The glass.
So you completely shifted the colours.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I understand.
And the
now.
squares and the diamond were also red. So yeah, completely changed the colours, and that's what I tend to do mostly nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand a little better your kind of dance between photographer and digital artist now.
Yeah.
I think you probably explained that and it didn't register.
Well, me. Probably because I didn't explain it well. So
you could do that. You could do that with analog techniques as well. So yeah, I still say you're a photographer.
That's fine. But yeah, I take a lot of photos of like plain concrete walls or buildings, because a lot of the modern buildings are just sort of in concrete nowadays, you know. So there's one I'm working on at the moment, concrete squares juxtaposed against each other. I've got some nice shadows because I went back on a couple of occasions, as I often do, until I got the shadows that I wanted. And so I'm just working on colouring it at the moment. But it was nothing. It was grey, completely grey.
I mean, given the amount of liberty you give yourself to make changes, is there anything you won't photograph? Because, I mean, you could almost, I guess, not to reduce what you're doing or anything, you could take a photo of anything and then in post create something from it. So could you look at something and go, well, I'm not going to photograph that because it's for whatever reason?
I mean, the things that I don't photograph are the ones that I just find sort of every day and that just don't really leap out at me, and that I can't, or that I'm missing something, because that could be the case too, you know. But or that there's sort of no originality there, or no questions that I might ask myself as when I saw this wall with the squares, you know. So there's just kind of nothing there for me, and nothing that I feel that I could introduce even with changing the colours, you know. I think that everything I've chosen so far, although I'm focusing a lot on the colours nowadays, there is something interesting in the essence of that building. So I still think I'm retaining that. It may be very simple nowadays, like one that I love is just, it's like three. They use different, slightly different materials. So there's one sort of column, which is concrete, but it's got crevices in it. Another one, which is, I don't know the material or anything, but it's grey, and it's sort of like, you might need to help me out a bit here if you're better with materials than I am, but it's sort of like sort of board just down, corrugated. It would have been corrugated plastic, I think, something like that. And then on the other side, there's more concrete, another concrete column. This was just plain. And, well, it was quite damaged, actually, so I needed to clean that up a little bit. But, yeah, essentially, we're talking 3 columns. But when I saw that, I thought, no, there's something here, and I really want to bring it out. And I think I did that by cleaning it up, by emphasising the different materials, the crevices, using the contrast and everything, and just adding in and using 3 different colours. And then choosing a sky. I chose a crimson sky, just as a stark contrast, in fact, just to really bring out the columns. But yeah, essentially they were just 3 columns, but they said something to me when I saw them.
Who are the photographers that you're looking at the moment, and maybe between 2006 and now? Just curious, kind of where you get your ideas, your ideas, and maybe your approach to photography. Yeah, so who are you looking at?
Well, I think it's more what I'm looking at. Instagram. I have had amazing inspiration from Instagram. I wasn't particularly interested in Instagram until COVID, and I was so bored that I thought, well, I'll have a look at Instagram and see if there's anything on there. There probably isn't, but I'll have a look. And the quality of photography. I mean, everything's on Instagram, of course, but yeah, just amazing minimalist photographers, and I've really, really been inspired by their work, and just discovering them on Instagram, and also gradually a lot of the competitions start coming up, and I start following the competitions, and then having a look at the winners there, and then having a look at their feeds. But that's actually where I get most of my inspiration from photographers on Instagram. And some of the world's best photographers are there. You know, it's sensational. It's just great to be able to see their work so readily.
Yeah, are there photographers whose work you're interested in that maybe take different kinds of photos, maybe not architectural or anything like that, portraits,
Yeah, definitely,
and things like that? So you're consuming that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any names that jump out?
Not any names that jump out. Most of the ones that I'm particularly interested in and that follow, they're minimalist photographers. But yeah, I mean, I don't just follow minimalist photographers. Sometimes street photographers, sometimes fashion photographers even. I follow a lot of hashtags. And so it could be black and white photography, it could be this or that, and so you get a lot of variety on those feeds.
Actually, because I mentioned architectural photography.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider yourself an architectural photographer?
Not necessarily. I think I can say minimalist, yes. Fine art photographer, yes. Architectural, maybe that's a little bit limiting because that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment, but I don't know if that's what I'm going to be doing in the future. It might be or it might not be. Yeah, I'm not really sure there.
I mean, how would you define architectural photography?
Well, I was going to ask you the same, actually.
I'm asking the questions here, Ruth.
Don't I even get one in? I guess I would say minimalist architecture photographer, yes. Architecture photographer, maybe not. Because architectural photographer, I would probably consider that they're, and this is, just an interpretation, because I'm not even really sure what the definition would be, But if I think of an architectural photographer, I'd probably imagining them focusing on more elements of the architecture, like if we had like the Sagrada Familia before us, I love Gaudi. They'd probably take the whole of the Sagrada Familia, and I'd probably just take a little portion of it. So minimalist architectural photographer, yes.
I think you got at least a foot in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way of saying it. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
but I'm often sort of not sure of what the real, definitions, classifications. I mean, I classify myself too, just because it's kind of convenient, really. Because when people say, "Well, what type of photographer are you?" Well, okay, I'm a fine art photographer. I'm a minimalist photographer because there's some sort of understanding there. But what is even a fine art photographer? There are so many definitions, and architectural photographer. Well, what's that too? So, yeah, I find definitions convenient, but sometimes a little bit problematic.
I mean, can you see yourself doing kind of the more traditional, excuse me, and the more traditional type of architectural photography, or like photos of buildings and showing their complete form and all that?
Maybe one day. I mean, that's kind of what I started out doing, and it's not what I want to be doing at the moment, but in the future it might be. Because maybe tomorrow, just like I did with flowers, when I focused on flowers, that was for a couple of years, and I was quite happy focusing on flowers then. But then at the end, I realized that, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I've done enough. I've exhausted my creativity here, and I want to move on to something else. So maybe tomorrow I'll wake up and say the same thing about what I'm doing at the moment. I don't think it'll be tomorrow, but in the future, who knows? And maybe, I probably see myself possibly zooming in a little bit more and becoming a little bit more abstract. Maybe if I see myself going anywhere, that's probably where I'll move, but perhaps not. But then, yeah, maybe I'll do that and decide that I want to zoom out. I really don't know.
Well, that's the fun.
It
Isn't it?
is. It is. That's
so there's
right.
no real kind of you haven't like set out a path for yourself and go, well, I'm going to do this, then this, then this, then this. It's kind of
There's no path in terms of what I'm going to be taking photos of, but there is something that I want to do. And that's connected with, it's kind of, well, what I would like to do with my work is I'd like it to be in people's living spaces. And that kind of connects with the way that my work has started to develop. So I mentioned before about adding more sort of mood and atmosphere. That kind of just came about. It's not something I was trying to do. Recently, my work got, some of my work, a collection of it called Urban Hues, got put onto an online store. And so they asked me to answer some questions and everything so that they could write a little journal article. And when I was answering those questions, I was just talking about, okay, I'm just trying to highlight, the buildings and everything that I see in the buildings. And then I thought, well, actually, no, there's something else that started happening there. And that was about adding in the mood and the atmosphere. So I hadn't actually realized that I was doing that. But once I had to verbalize it, I realized that I had sort of, started moving off into a slightly different direction. As I said before, I was kind of amalgamating them, but it started moving in a slightly different way. And that sort of coincides with me wanting for my works, what I would love is for my works to be in people's living spaces, their home or an office. And so the fact now that they're for me not just the buildings, they've also got this emotional element. That means that I think they're suited to people's living spaces more perhaps than like a gallery space. So that if they're sitting on their walls, that there is some emotional sort of connection there, that they're complementing the space. Like one of the photos which I'm going to hang when I get it printed in my place is it's of a summer scene. It was taken in summer. But it very much communicates the summer vibe, the happy vibe, very light and sort of airy. And I want that in my dining room. The colours complement, but because of the vibe that it exudes. And on my other wall, I've hung a black and white one, which is called Serene. And it's called Serene because when I showed the photo to my cousin, that's what she said about it. And I actually know the people who bought a copy of it. And they said that they love looking at it on their wall because it's very harmonious and it's very serene. So there is sort of a direction in that sense that's where I would like my work to be in people's living spaces so that it can enhance their living spaces. And I guess why I've become conscious of that is, well, going back to COVID again, we're all stuck inside a lot of time, and I was in an apartment which I didn't want to be in any longer. We'd been there for quite a while. It had been good, but it had been almost 10 years. Well, 8 years, I guess. And it was run down, it was small, and we wanted to move out. We wanted to buy a place and be somewhere else, and we couldn't. We couldn't find a place to buy because there wasn't really much on the market, so we were stuck, literally stuck. And I just hated it. I started to hate living there. And because one was inside so very much, I think I'd always been aware, but I became even more aware of how important one's living space is and how it can really affect their well-being. And so all of that kind of came together with the direction that my photography had gone in. And so, yes, in terms of direction, there is a direction in that sense. But in the future, what my photos will look like, no idea whatsoever.
Is there a consideration, when you're creating your work, from capture to, the editing process, how much consideration is there put to like what people are going to think of it, where it's going to hang, and all that sort of stuff? I guess use a bit of a dirty word, like the marketability of the work. Are you thinking about that at all?
Sometimes it's in the back of my mind. I think if I were a professional photographer, in the sense that I made it, that it was, I made my living from photography, I think that would be in the back of my mind a lot. And I think that would really get to me. Sometimes I think, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful just to be able to do my photography and not have to do my full-time job? But really, I don't think that would be a good way for me to go, because I don't think I deal very well with that pressure. And perhaps I'd make compromises too that I wouldn't really want to be making so that it would be more marketable. Because I would like it to, ideally, I would like my full-time job to become a part-time job so that I would be able to dedicate more time to my photography and perhaps, make a bit more of a living from it. But I would like there to be that balance, so that I can pretty much just continue to do what I want to do, and not focus too much on the marketability. Although, as I said, sometimes it is a little bit in the back of my mind, but it's not something that's really shaping my work very much. It's more what I want to be doing with it. And I hope people like it. And so far, people seem to. But it's really what I want to be doing with that photo.
Yeah, it just seems like one of those things that when you start creating something that people are paying you for, it kind of encourages you to just keep on making that kind of work. And maybe I'm saying this because I don't really sell any of my work, and I can just do whatever the hell I want, and I don't really care. I just think, you can find yourself where you might want to progress, but you don't want to kind of alienate or push away people that might buy your work just to experiment, I guess.
I think that's totally true, and I think that's why, for me, I wouldn't want to be doing it. For other people, it works out very well, but I don't think I would handle that very well, because I think I would be pressured by the marketability of my work, and I would sort of go in that direction when possibly it's not the direction that is in my heart, that I would really want to pursue, and it could be detrimental. So I think for me, a combination is best. And it does influence me a little bit still. I'm not totally immune to it. But I guess influence me in the sense that, okay, maybe there are two color combinations here that I could go with, both that I like. This one might be a little bit more appealing. Okay, I might go with this one. But I could have gone either way, and I would have been comfortable going either way. If it's a question of, I don't like this one, but I like this one, but the one I don't like is the one that perhaps people will like a lot more, no, I'm not going with that one, because I don't have that financial pressure. I do sell a little bit of my work, not that much. I would like to sell more, definitely, but for me, I'm not motivated by the financial aspect. I mean, I'm not someone who's particularly motivated by money anyhow. It's we need money to live, sure, but I don't aspire to be rich, and certainly not from my creative outlet. For me, it's more about I love it, and it's the time when I feel the best. I feel when I'm out taking photos, or when I'm working on a photo, when I'm thinking about photos, I spend a lot of time thinking about the next, okay, with this particular photo, what can I do here? What about the colors? What about this? What about that? Oh, maybe I need to take out that bit of the building. So I spend a lot of time thinking about it, and I really enjoy that. And it's the time when I feel the most complete in a personal sense. So for me, that's important, not whether I sell. I mean, I'm happy when I sell something. I'm very, very happy. I'm happy if I get, some sort of recognition in a competition. Very, very happy. But it's not the most important thing.
Well, Ruth, I think that's a great place to wrap it up.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah. Sounds like a good idea.
Well, thank you for coming along and sharing your story. I'm sure there's a lot more, but maybe you can come back again sometime. But
Love to. And thank you very much for the interview.
thanks.
Thanks a lot. Bye.